Parenting and race. Why and how families must talk to their children. There isn't anyone living in the world, and especially in the Western world, is unaware of very sad events that recently has been happening in United States of America. I want to start by a quote by Nelson Mandela. No one is born hating another person because of the color of his skin or background or his religion. People must learn to hate, and if they can learn to hate, they can be taught to love. George Floyd, a name that is almost known to every single one regardless of the age. He was an unarmed African American person in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and he was killed on Memorial Day, 25th of May 2020, when a white policeman really almost strangulated him while the poor guy was crying, saying, "I cannot breathe." 2 autopsies were performed independently on him, and both confirmed that he died because of homicide. Subsequently, the officer who knelt on his neck has been charged with second-degree murder, and the other 3 officers have been charged with aiding and abetting second-degree murder. His memorial was not resembling anyone else. All types of races, all Americans went out complaining and feeling very saddened for a life that lost without a cause, without a good reason, without even him defending himself. And hence, our young people in the homes today are really always asking about racism. Racism is defined by Merriam-Webster dictionary as the belief that certain race of people is, by birth or nature, is superior to others. However, if you ask people of color, they define racism quite differently. To them, racism at a minimum is prejudice plus power. And that power comes from a race being part of a group, feeling they are better than others. And the system sometimes supports that belief. Whites typically lack a racial consciousness. Most whites are unaware they are racist, and their race has real consequences for their lives. Whites often believe they are without culture. This graph shows you what do Americans in the society and politics say about racism. 64% still believe racism remains a major problem. This poll survey showed that the majority of Americans still think that the responsibility to fix the race problem is not exclusive to one race. Both races need to work towards it. 60% responded this way. But let me give you a history of the American slavery. The Declaration of Independence that you all study in school in 1776 claimed that all men are created equal. However, the U.S. Constitution determined that enslaved persons would be counted at 3/5 of all other persons for purposes of government and representation of taxations. By 1860, the United States was divided into slave and free states. In 1860, that year, census takers counted close to 4 million slaves in America. Slavery was legal in America until 1865. By the 15th Amendment in 1870, it was illegal to deprive any eligible citizen the right to vote, regardless of his or her color. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965 made it clear segregation in schools were illegal. Unfortunately, however, in spite of all these declarations, racism unfortunately still persists in America. If you take some of the statistics, and these are well-documented articles, people with black-sounding names had to send out 50% more job applications than people with white-sounding names to get the same job callback. A black man is 3 times more likely to be searched in a traffic stop and 6 times more likely to go to jail than a white male. If a black person kills a white person, he or she is twice as likely to receive the death sentence as a white person who kills a black person. Blacks serve up to 20% more time in prison than whites for the same type of crime. Blacks are 38% more likely to be sentenced to death than white people for the same crime. These were U.S. News survey among blacks and Americans. While whites tend to focus on creating good-intentioned, right-thinking people, people of color, however, tend to focus on group equality and justice. Both are important. We need both ideas. We need both ideologies. So they need not to be in war, but the focus must be on working together in order to undo the racially oriented society. This is a quote by Michael Emerson in his book, The Persistent Problem. How about where is it in the Bible? Slavery, partiality, favoritism. Under a heading called "We are all created in His image," the Holy Spirit wrote in Genesis 1, "So God created man in His own image. In the image of God He created him. Male and female He created." So regardless of the color or ethnicity, we are all created in the same image of the Creator. God cares about all creatures, all people, regardless of their color. In Deuteronomy 10, He says, "He administers justice for the fatherless and the widow, and loves the stranger, giving him food and clothing." But does God have favoritism? Does God like whites more than blacks or Asians more than Africans? Actually, God has no partiality. In Acts 10, St. Luke wrote, "Peter opened his mouth and said, 'In truth, I perceive that God shows no partiality, but in every nation, whoever fears Him and works righteousness is accepted by Him.'" St. Paul wrote similar stuff by writing in 1 Corinthians 12, "We were all baptized into the one Spirit, for by one Spirit we were all baptized into one body, whether Jews or Greeks, whether slaves or free, and have all been made to drink into one Spirit." Regardless if you were born slave or born free, if you are born white or you are born black or born Asian or you're born Egyptian, we were all baptized in the same Spirit, and God has no partiality. In Acts 15, He made no distinction between us and them. Us and them meaning Jews and Gentiles, because the Gentiles is the whole world, regardless of the color, purifying their hearts by faith. And let me give you a tiny story about a black woman in the Bible. Moses decided to take a woman who is from Cush, and Cushite woman means a woman from southern Ethiopia. Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses. How can he take a woman with color? But God made it very clear he is supporting Moses. And he wrote in Jeremiah, can the Ethiopian change his skin or the leopard its spots? And in Numbers, when God rebuked both Aaron and Miriam, he made it clear that why then were you not afraid to speak against my servant Moses? So God had no problem bringing a woman with color into the close family, the arch prophet Moses. Not only that he has no partiality, but actually favoritism and partiality in the Bible is a sinful act. In James 2 we read, if you show partiality, you commit sin and are convicted by the law as transgressors. If you have a favoritism, if you discriminate, this is not Christian. And in Revelation 7, we see a very beautiful scenery from all nations, tribes, people, tongues standing before the throne. God did not have a group of his own. The idea of selected group has gone and not used anymore. The whole world is his people if they really follow his commandments. Not only he has no partiality, not only partiality is a sin, not only we were brought up in his image and we are all belong to the same family of God, but we are all equal in his eyes. In Galatians 3, St. Paul writes, there is neither Jew nor Greek, there is neither slave nor free, there is neither male nor female, for you all are one in Christ Jesus. God is not gender-oriented, not color-oriented. He is for all. And in Philemon 16 is a very important example of how a slave was equal to the master. The story is very interesting. St. Paul was admitted to a prison, to a jail, where he met Onesimus. When he met that guy, he was arrested because of a theft. He actually stole from his master Philemon. And when St. Paul baptized Onesimus, he returned Onesimus to his master and telling him, no longer accept him as a bond servant, but more than a bond servant, as a beloved brother, especially to me, but how much more to you, both in the flesh and in the Lord. As if he's telling the master, don't anymore think of him as a slave. He is your brother in baptism, both in flesh and in the Lord. And strangely, St. Paul writes to the slaves in Rome, asking them to actually serve their masters, not as if they are watching them, but as if God is watching them. While Christianity never raised the sword or a knife to stop slavery, with the spread of Christianity in the Roman Empire, slavery was abolished, because slavery was completely against the teachings of the Bible. In Romans 10, St. Paul writes, there is no distinction between a Jew and a Greek, for the same Lord for all is rich to all who call upon him. And in Colossians 3, he writes similar, where there is neither Greek nor Jew, circumcised nor uncircumcised, barbarian or Scythian, slave nor free, but Christ is all and in all. Whether educated or not, whether you have a color or not, whether you are a Greek or a Jew, you are all equal in the eyes of God. Unfortunately, however, there are many wrong conceptions going on. Some people will say, you know what, this stuff gets me. It gives me a headache. I don't care about it. I don't want to be bothered by racism. This is not my problem. Why do I have to think about it? Why do I have to talk to my family about it? Unfortunately, you are absolutely wrong, because it's coming to your doors. It's in the media. It's in the news. Your children are listening to it. Your children have friends who are talking to each other about it. And we need to know where do we stand and how rightly we can answer our children and our adults in the churches. Parents, however, might be hesitant to discuss race and racism for many reasons. Maybe because of their lack of knowledge, or don't know what to say about it, or fear of upsetting one child, or thinking their child is too naive, too young, he doesn't know about it, so they are trying to avoid him trauma or discrimination, not knowing that a lot of these children are well informed and they are quite aware of what's happening. Some of the reasons that parents do not always come out and speak about it because they themselves went through some sort of discrimination before they came to the immigration land. And in their own countries, they were prejudiced upon, discriminated upon. So they are letting go as if it's normal. No, it's not normal. Some of us assume our children are color blind to the color of skin. No, they are not. They are not. And it will be too naive from you as a parent to not speak about it. Maybe we ourselves, with all respect to every listener, we may be also racist. We may be also calling names some people. We may be using in a hush-hush way that we think this race or this race do not really are upscaled or leveled to the high level of classiness. Maybe we are giving wrong messages. We hear what's happening and we say, oh, they deserve it. So maybe we just like the silence treatment. Don't talk about it, it will pass. No, it won't. Not again and not today. So how to speak to your children? Let me just preface it by saying children may not understand the word systemic racism, but many kids understand the right from wrong, the fair from unfair, and what it feels like to be not included in a group, secluded, segregated. They know that very well. And if you start opening it up, they will tell you, yes, mom, yes, dad, I was also felt secluded, not invited, not welcomed in one of the groups. If your children are preschool and elementary ages, this is the age when kids begin to ask questions about why people look differently, whether an Asian or African American or a white American. If your child is asking about someone's skin color, you might say, isn't it wonderful that God created all of us equal, but we have several colors, so it looks like a beautiful, like a crayon box, has the yellow and blue and green and many other colors. Look at how the flowers, they are not all the same. Try to give him the idea that God is the reason, and God created us all equal, and God likes all colors. Also, parents should do their best to limit the exposure of their young children to a lot of media, especially the brutality, the looting, the aggression, the hate, the anarchy. All of this is not good for a preschool or elementary age. You can tell him in sound, without too explosive words, what it means to be different color and why what's happening is not fair for them and not fair for all of us. And we definitely do not agree with discrimination regardless of color or religion, because we came from a society where we were being discriminated upon because of religion. One of the other ways that you can talk to the elementary school young kid, you ask the question and then you ask them a question. So if they ask you why the colors, you can ask them, what do you think they feel when they are not allowed in, or they are treated differently by the police, or they are not allowed in certain jobs? What do you think they should feel? What do you think, what does unfairness means? Talk to them and be easy about it. You went through it, or at least one of your family went through it when it was unfair for you to be admitted to a certain job. Why can't you stand with the weak and the person who have no voice? Introduce concepts that diversity is good. Different colors is amazing. Expose them to pictures of different colors. Tell them that's how beautiful we will be and how complementing each other we will be. If your child is a teenager, tweens, first find out how much they know, and you will be amazed. They may know much more than us. Find out how angry they are or what's their opinion. They agree with which side? How do they think? Is it unfair or fair? What's unfairness? What's segregation? What's discrimination? What is right and what is wrong? I think one of the discussions we all need to have with our young boys and girls, how many friends you have? What type of friends you have? And do they have friends from every color? And I don't mean the intimate friends. Sometimes the intimate friends are 2 or 3 and they must be so close to your religion, to your faith, to your dogma, to your traditions. But they need to have a large acquaintances of groups where everyone is represented. They are not excluding anyone. By avoiding the topic, you are not solving the problem. By hushing an issue or closing the TV while they are watching, you are not making them comfortable. You just left the questions to be answered by somebody else, and who knows how the answer will be. Help them to understand that no one is less human than another in the eyes of God, and it should be in the eyes of society. No one is less human than the other. No one should have less rights than the other. We were all coming from a culture we had occasionally less rights than others. We should not come here and hurt the feelings of our kids growing up, teaching them discrimination. When discrimination has a bitter taste, I wish no one should have to try it. Also, among the late teens in age, you can also show them videos of peaceful protest. Both colors, any color, they are raising their flags and walking without hurting anybody. You can tell them the brutality, the anarchy, the hurting of the rights of people. That's absolutely wrong, regardless of the cause. However, the peaceful protest asking for equal rights is good, and you can ask them to even watch that. Your work as a parent is to raise your children in a way where they experience the whole community and they love everyone. Because if we start teaching them hate to one color or one race, a Latino American or African American or Asian American or whatever, we are not teaching them God's eyes. God's eyes are so global. Accept and love all colors, and they are all His children. And if it's up to Him, He wants to save every single one if they follow His path. I want to end by a quote from Martin Luther King. He says, "I plan to stand by nonviolence because I have found it to be a philosophy of life that regulates not only my dealing in the struggle for racial justice, but also my dealing with people and with my own self." I hope this episode comes in a time that you will be benefiting from it. May God bless you all. See you soon.